There is a silent war that rages inside every person who has ever chosen to be good in a world that rewards the opposite. You give, they take. You forgive, they betray. You remain loyal, and they forget you the moment you're no longer useful. Niccolò Machiavelli, often misjudged as cold and cruel, understood this brutal paradox centuries ago. In his most infamous writings, he revealed a disturbing truth. Goodness, when unguarded, is a liability. And in the game of power, kindness without strategy is the fastest route to irrelevance, or worse, ruin. This isn't a call to become heartless. No, it's a warning against being naive. Machiavelli didn't despise goodness. He feared what the world does to the good. When you operate with honor in a realm built on deception, you will always find yourself outmaneuvered by those who are willing to do what you won't. The kind soul often becomes the sacrificial lamb, the noble intention becomes the easy target, and the gentle heart becomes the weapon used against itself. But Machiavelli offers a solution, not to abandon goodness, but to armor it, to make your morality a choice, not a weakness, to become someone who can be merciful, but also someone who can be feared. In this way, you stop being prey and start becoming a force. He was known for his unwavering generosity. In boardrooms and banquets alike, he always offered a helping hand, a kind word, a sacrifice for the collective good. Yet, his openness became the very tool others used to manipulate him. At first, his colleagues admired his apparent selflessness. They smiled as he shared credit and bore burdens far beyond his role. But behind closed doors, whispers began. This good man was too soft, too willing to give, too easily exploited. Every time he extended himself, someone absorbed that energy for their own gain. Invitations became obligations, favors morphed into debts, and his honesty transformed into an open invitation for deceit. He trusted too readily, believing that integrity was the highest currency, but in a realm governed by hidden ambitions, his virtues turned into vulnerabilities. His acts of kindness were repurposed as leverage, and soon he found himself a pawn in a game he never knew was being played. As the weight of these betrayals mounted, he began to understand a harsh truth. Goodness, without the shield of strategy, can be a curse. The very act of giving, when unguarded, drains your power. When everyone expects you to be generous, your value depreciates, and your intentions become fodder for those who calculate with ruthlessness rather than honor. Slowly, he noticed that every gesture of kindness came with an unspoken cost. The more he gave, the less he had left for himself. People started to regard his generosity as weakness, their demands growing bolder, their exploitation more brazen. Instead of being celebrated as a noble spirit, he became a convenient resource, taken for granted, dismissed when inconvenient. In a bitter twist, the good man learned that in a world fueled by greed, the currency of virtue is often bought at the price of self-sacrifice. He found himself caught in a relentless cycle. The more he tried to do good, the more his goodness was used against him. And that cycle left him isolated, as those who once admired him began to see him as nothing more than a tool to be used. At the breaking point, he retreated into silence, a decision not born of cruelty, but of self-preservation. That retreat was the first step toward learning that to be truly strong, one must learn to armor one's virtue with wisdom. His journey from a generous pawn to a cautious strategist began by realizing that unbridled goodness, without calculated boundaries, is a weakness exploited by the unscrupulous. Machiavelli warned that to be truly safe in the game of power, you must guard your energy as fiercely as a treasure. His generous spirit was a treasure, but without protection, it was simply another resource for those without honor. In that silence, he vowed to reforge his kindness, not to become heartless, but to be untouchable. She was the embodiment of honor and compassion. Her decisions were guided by a moral compass that never wavered, and her colleagues admired her integrity in a field life with duplicity. Yet, the very principles that defined her became the source of her undoing. In a world where the ruthless maneuvered through backroom deals and hidden alliances, her transparent ideals were a glaring liability. Time and again, she found that doing the right thing set her apart in a way that made her isolated. As she insisted on fairness and open communication, those around her began to see vulnerability in her unwavering commitment to justice. They learned that she would never compromise, that guilt and excuses were foreign to her nature. And in that unwavering honesty, they found a way to sidestep accountability through manipulation. Her successes, achieved through honest work and genuine cooperation, were overshadowed by the rapid rise of her more calculating peers. Every transparent act left her exposed. As deals were made behind closed doors, she stood alone on a stage of honesty, while others orchestrated successes with subtle deceit. Her reputation as a paragon of virtue became a target for those who saw her as an obstacle to their own ambitions. The idealist struggled with the crushing realization that to navigate power, one sometimes must cloak ambition in secrecy and strategy. In pursuing excellence on terms of honor, she inadvertently isolated herself from alliances that operated under different rules. Her willingness to give everyone the benefit of the doubt became the ammunition of those who wore masks of camaraderie. Day by day, the environment around her shifted. Conversations turned insincere, and genuine connections gave way to expediency. The world she once believed in, one of mutual respect and honorable competition, began to reveal its darker underbelly. Her heart ached with the knowledge that, in this unforgiving arena, being good was a curse rather than a blessing. Yet, within her pain, there was a dawning insight. True power might require the courage to reconfigure one's principles, not to abandon them, but to protect them. She started learning the art of strategic silence and cautious trust, realizing that her goodness did not have to be sacrificed at the altar of ambition. With each setback, she honed a quieter, more resilient strength. In that crucible of betrayal and idealism, she began to evolve. Her honor became tempered with a pragmatic wisdom that allowed her to navigate treacherous waters without losing herself. She discovered that to remain untouchable, one must balance the heart with a shrewd understanding of realpolitik, a lesson that Machiavelli himself would have recognized as essential. Her transformation was not a rejection of her ideals, but a reinforcement. She learned to be a silent guardian of her virtues, protected by boundaries that not only shielded her spirit, but also commanded respect in a realm where only the cunning survived. He rose to leadership not through force, but by inspiring compassion and forging genuine bonds with his team. His leadership was marked by empathy, a listening ear, a supportive hand, and an open-door policy. Yet, as his influence grew, so too did the envy and opportunism of those around him. His willingness to understand and support became a lure from manipulation by those seeking to benefit at his expense. At first, his transparency created a loyal following. People trusted him, confided in him, and expected his unwavering support. But soon, a subtler dynamic emerged. His empathy was used against him. His open-hearted leadership was a double-edged sword as colleagues began to hide their true intentions behind compliments and feigned concern. They turned his genuine advice into a weakness, masking their ambitions behind a veneer of camaraderie. It was not long before he realized that his empathy made him predictable, a soft target for those who viewed kindness as a liability in competitive spheres. His efforts to mediate conflicts and build bridges were twisted into stepping stones for others to climb over him. The same goodwill that had once inspired unity was now a strategic asset for those who played the game of power without scruples. Facing mounting betrayal and covert scheming, he discovered that to remain untouchable, a leader must learn to guard his vulnerabilities. Empathy, though noble, must be coupled with discernment. Without a protective barrier, the vulnerable heart becomes prey to opportunism, and the very essence of compassionate leadership risks being devoured by greed and ambition. He began to cultivate a balance, a controlled reserve of his empathic nature. With time, he learned to gauge which battles required his full attention and which were merely distractions from the core mission. Like a seasoned strategist, he started to compartmentalize his emotions, sharing his genuine self only with those who had proven themselves worthy of trust. This transformation was not immediate. It was wrought by painful experiences and quiet moments of reflection. Every betrayal added a layer of armor around his heart. Every deception sharpened his insight into human nature. Slowly, he transformed his empathetic leadership into one that was both compassionate and impervious, a blend of warmth and steely resolve. In embracing this duality, he became a leader whose very presence dissuaded exploitation. His team learned that while his door remained open to those who truly sought to grow, it was also a barrier against those who would use his kindness against him. His empathy became his strength, not his curse, as he skillfully balanced vulnerability with vigilance. By mastering this delicate equilibrium, he transcended the common pitfall of being too good in a ruthless world. He became untouchable in his integrity, not by hardening his heart completely, but by learning to protect it with measured discretion and strategic clarity. In a bureaucracy steeped in corruption and self-interest, she stood out like a beacon of idealism. Her consistent efforts to introduce transparency, fairness, and accountability were revolutionary in a system conditioned to reward manipulation. Yet, her openness was met with quiet hostility. Conspiracies were whispered behind her back, and her every honest word was scrutinized and twisted. In this environment, being good turned out to be more than a virtue. It was a curse that isolated her from alliances that could have uplifted her cause. Day by day, she became painfully aware that her ethical stance made her an anomaly, a threat to those content with the status quo. Every time she challenged the system, her efforts were met not with support, but with subtle sabotage. The more she tried to shine a light on the corruption, the more the darkness around her seemed to intensify. The very order she sought to reform retaliated with schemes, forcing her to fight not just for justice, but for her own survival. Her ideals, once a source of strength, began to weigh her down. The higher she held the banner of truth, the more enemies she inadvertently made. Leaders who had once nodded in agreement now fawned insincerely, while covert circles whispered that her beliefs were impractical, even dangerous. The cost of staying true to her ideals became evident in isolation, fatigue, and the relentless pressure to conform. In the silence of long nights, she wrestled with a harrowing dilemma. How can one remain good in a world that devours goodness? The answer, she slowly discovered, was not to abandon her principles, but to redefine how she wielded them. The true rebellion was not to scream against injustice, but to build unassailable strength in quiet determination. Drawing on Machiavellian insight, she began to practice a new kind of resistance. She became guarded in her expressions of goodwill, measuring her words as carefully as a strategist plans his moves. She realized that while transparency is an admirable trait, it should not come at the cost of one's integrity or security. With each calculated gesture, she fortified her resolve, allowing her inner light to burn steadily, undimmed by external forces. Her transformation was subtle but profound. She learned to nurture her ideals internally, sharing only what was necessary to inspire change, while holding fast to a private reservoir of strength. Those who once saw her as a naive idealist began to respect the disciplined passion behind her actions. In doing so, she not only survived, but started to shift the system from within, quietly dismantling corruption piece by piece. In the end, her journey illuminated a powerful truth. Being good in a corrupt world is not a weakness, if that goodness is tempered with strategic wisdom. Her quiet rebellion became a beacon for others, proof that one could remain true without being vulnerable, that authentic integrity could, with measured control, become an untouchable force in a flawed system. By the time the corridors of power began to shift, she had already redefined what it meant to be both good and strong. And that rebirth, this fusion of heart and strategic mind, became her enduring legacy, a testament to the power of quiet revolution in a world too often dominated by the curse of unguarded goodness. He was admired for being agreeable, the man who never said no. He avoided confrontation, diffused conflict with a smile, and adjusted himself to fit every situation. To many, he was the glue that held the group together. But behind that charm was a silent erosion. Each time he suppressed his voice to appease others, a part of his identity dimmed. Being good, for him, meant being liked. And being liked became an obsession that cost him everything. His calendar was filled with tasks that weren't his responsibility. Every favor, every late-night rescue, every rearranged plan was done to avoid the discomfort of displeasing someone. He believed his adaptability made him indispensable, but in truth, it made him invisible. People came to expect his compliance, not respect his presence. When he tried to set a boundary, the shock was palpable. The same people who once praised his kindness now accused him of being selfish. The moment he hinted at prioritizing himself, he was met with resistance. He realized then his goodness wasn't love, it was convenience. They didn't cherish him for who he was, but for how well he bent to their will. Over time, this realization turned into bitterness. He wasn't living his own life. He was a reflection of everyone else's expectations. His deepest fears, that conflict meant rejection, that saying no made him unworthy, had kept him trapped in a prison of self-erasure. What he once saw as goodness, he now understood as self-abandonment. Machiavelli warned that trying to please everyone leads to ruin. The people-pleaser saw that truth in his own exhaustion. True power doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being respected. And respect often demands the courage to say no, to disappoint, to protect one's boundaries, even at the cost of approval. He began to reclaim his time, his voice, his space. The transformation was not loud. It was deliberate. He chose when to help and when to step back. He understood now that kindness without self-respect breeds exploitation. His no became as powerful as his yes, and in that newfound firmness, he found the dignity he never knew he'd lost. Those who truly valued him stayed. Those who didn't drifted away. But for the first time, he no longer feared their absence. He learned that being good doesn't mean being submissive. It means being principled, and no principle matters more than honoring your own worth. His curse had been the illusion that constant giving would earn love. His liberation came when he realized that self-respect is the highest form of goodness. From that place of quiet power, he became untouchable, not by denying his nature, but by mastering it. He was the kind of friend who would defend you in your absence, lend without question, and keep your secrets as though they were his own. His loyalty was absolute. For years, he carried the burdens of others, believing that true friendship meant unshakable devotion. But when his turn came to ask for help, he found silence. Worse, he discovered betrayal. His most trusted companion, the one he had protected countless times, had spoken against him in a crucial meeting, not out of necessity, but for personal gain. The knife in his back didn't come from an enemy. It came from the person he had once called brother. That realization hollowed him out. He had believed that loyalty would be reciprocated, but in a world governed by shifting alliances, loyalty was only as valuable as its utility. Machiavelli warned, "Men are ungrateful, fickle liars. The loyal friend learned this truth too late. His unwavering support had never been balanced by discernment. He had trusted blindly, and in doing so, made himself vulnerable to the one person who knew exactly where to strike. The aftermath wasn't just betrayal, it was exile. Those who had once benefited from his loyalty distanced themselves. Guilt and shame are powerful silencers. No one wanted to be reminded of the man they had failed. He stood alone in the ruins of friendships he thought were sacred. But in the stillness of that solitude, he found clarity. Loyalty, he realized, is a currency that must be spent wisely. It must be tested before it is trusted. Unquestioning devotion is admirable, but without caution, it is a leash others can use to lead you to your downfall. He began to rebuild, not with bitterness, but with boundaries. He no longer gave loyalty as a gift. It had to be earned. He no longer mistook shared memories for shared values. His new alliances were fewer, but stronger, built not on nostalgia, but on mutual respect and proof of character. The pain of betrayal became his compass. He learned to see beneath smiles, to recognize the subtle signals of self-interest. His heart remained open, but his eyes stayed sharp. The balance between honor and caution became his strength. In this rebirth, he was no longer the naive loyalist. He was a strategist of trust, a guardian of his own worth. And in mastering the art of selective allegiance, he escaped the curse of being good without wisdom. She ran her department with fairness. Promotions were based on merit. Mistakes were treated as learning opportunities. She believed that leading with integrity would create loyalty and excellence. And for a time, it did. But when higher management changed, her commitment to fairness made her an obstacle to those seeking shortcuts to power. A new wave of executives, colder and more results-driven, found her leadership style inefficient. They saw her as too patient, too forgiving, too democratic. She defended her team during layoffs, shielded them from unrealistic expectations, and refused to play politics. That defiance made her expendable. Her dismissal was framed as a strategic restructuring, but everyone knew what it meant. Her position was given to someone who operated without conscience. The new boss made quick cuts, took credit for old ideas, and created fear-based productivity. The department's morale plummeted, but the numbers rose. Watching from the outside, she was devastated. She had built a culture of care, only to be replaced by one of control. Her former employees still reached out, whispering gratitude and regret. Yet, she could do nothing for them now. The system had rewarded ruthlessness over reason. And then, clarity came. In power, perception often matters more than principles. She had been good, but not calculating. She had assumed fairness alone would protect her. Machiavelli, had she listened earlier, would have advised her to master appearances and politics as much as morality. She began to understand how power truly works. In future roles, she blended her integrity with quiet influence. She built alliances higher up, learned to anticipate political winds, and made her compassion strategic rather than naive. Her leadership became sharper, not less human, but less exposed. Her redemption came when she returned to leadership in another company, this time stronger. She led with the same values, but now with Machiavellian foresight. Her kindness was no longer used against her. It was respected, even feared, because she knew when to reveal her cards and when to hold them. She finally broke the curse of being good by understanding that goodness alone is not enough. It must be armored with awareness. It must not bow to fear, nor assume the world will play fair. True power is ethical intelligence, and now she had both. Goodness is a beautiful virtue, but when untethered from strategy, it becomes a trap. Machiavelli did not argue against morality. He warned against blind morality. He knew that in the real world, whether in politics, business, or love, those who lead with nothing but virtue often become prey to those who lead with calculation. We've seen it. The loyal friend betrayed, the fair leader discarded, the people pleaser drained of self. In each case, goodness wasn't the flaw, it was the naivety that accompanied it. A goodness that expects the world to return its kindness in equal measure is a goodness destined for heartbreak. The curse of being good isn't in the goodness itself, it's in the assumption that goodness guarantees safety, love, or power. It doesn't, not in a world where self-interest often drives decisions and appearances eclipse substance. But this curse is not unbreakable. It can be shattered the moment you pair your kindness with boundaries, your empathy with discernment, and your integrity with strategic foresight. You don't have to become ruthless. You have to become wise. You must learn when to give and when to withhold, when to trust and when to test, when to act from the heart and when to protect it. Machiavelli never told us to be evil. He told us to see clearly, to understand the nature of people, the illusions of power, and the importance of controlling perception. He told us that survival and greatness demand both virtue and vigilance. So, if you've been hurt for being good, don't abandon your light. Refine it, protect it with intelligence, cloak it in strength. Let your goodness evolve, not into weakness, but into a force no one can exploit. In that transformation, you don't become less of who you are. You become untouchable.